It's Stnr, Chapter 3, where Archer Sloan, Stoner's mentor, offers him a full-time instructorship because it's the war and they're sort of hard up for things. Other than that, the usual policy of most universities is, yeah, they don't let people who are students at places then become instructors at places, but because of the law, that is the case. And so he accepts it because, as he says, I think it's like, he'd reluctantly kind of put forward a few letters of applications to universities and colleges in the general area. Um, but he had known at the University of Columbia the kind of security and warmth that he should have been able to feel as a child in his home and had not been able to. And he was unsure of his ability to find those elsewhere. I'm going to pause and push the doodle away. Okay, doodle sorted. Um, so, yeah, again, it's this university as a refuge, as a place where he gets his security and warmth, which is kind of interesting because other than, you know, a couple of friends, I don't know if you can call Finch a friend, um, he's it's an institution that he's found his comfort in, which, I mean, it's a place that's, brought him books and learning and history and a wider world than the farm that he was on. But it's interesting that's the kind of person that would kind of glom onto something like a university. And there is that. Yeah, you do get that sense from an institution. I have, worked at different kinds of institutions, government, and, as a university student myself. And it's like, yeah, it's a certain kind of impersonal security there, a bulwark against the rest of the world, I guess. Um, there's an interesting note here of him. His dissertation topic had been the influence of classical tradition upon the medieval lyric, and he had spent much of the summer rereading the classics of classical and medieval Latin poets, and especially the poems upon death. He wondered again at the easy, graceful manner in which the Roman lyricists accept the fact of death, as if the nothingness they faced were a tribute to the richness of the years they had enjoyed, and he marveled at the bitterness, the terror, the barely concealed hatred he found in some of the latter Christian poets of the Latin tradition, when they looked at death, which promised, however vaguely, a rich and ecstatic eternity of life, as if that death and promise were a mockery that soured the days of their living. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing of this is all from Stoner's perspective, a guy who, I don't know if he has that Christian belief. We'll see as we go along. I always project my own atheistic stuff into characters, so I have to be careful about that. But that idea that nothingness is actually kind of a tribute to the richness of the years that they've actually lived, while for Christian poets, that that an ecstatic eternity of life was like a mockery that soured the days of their living. It's like, and what camp does Stoner fall into? If he is indeed the medieval monk of this thing, is this going to is an ecstatic afterlife the thing that's going to sour his days of living, or is he going to have this kind of a rich inner life at the university and then welcome nothingness as it comes? Yeah, interesting. Um, yes, Gordon Finch does return and pretty quickly settles himself into a kind of higher up position as like assistant to the dean, just because he can't take classes. But it's like, he's wedged himself right into the hierarchy at the just below the highest point, and it's a dean who is well beyond. It's the of the arts and sciences faculty, um, who has well beyond retirement, but is sort of so much of a fixture they're afraid of getting rid of him, and sounds like he's basically completely senile. So you know that Gordon Finch is just going to take over. I'm struggling with the fact that Gordon Finch is such an oppositional character, such a guy of the world in comparison to Stoner, who's our guy now, that I want to hate him. But I think I gotta kind of resist that. It's like he's an opposite, but he's not necessarily an asshole who's going to make Stoner's life miserable. But I guess we'll see. Now, what he does do is he does do is introduce Stoner to the woman in the book. Stoner paused in the doorway, caught by his vision of the young woman. This is at a dinner party that Finch has organized. Her long, delicate-featured face smiled at those around her, and her slender, almost fragile fingers deftly manipulated urn and cup. Looking at her, Stoner was assailed by consciousness of his own heavy clumsiness. So, um, yeah, we've got. She raised her head, and suddenly he met her eyes. They were pale and large, and seemed to shine with a light within themselves. It's like, okay, we've got a kind of a beloved, and this beloved is Edith Elaine Bostwick, um, and she is a cousin of she's some kind of cousin of the Dean's down from St. Louis visiting an aunt. And Finch kind of gives this grin of like, oh, Bill, what do you know? Sure, I'll introduce you. Come on, which is like, it's probably appropriate that some guy, that Finch, this guy who's very much kind of grounded in the world, in the earthliness of things, would be the one that would introduce Stoner um, to the woman, which I do think is going to be, as you go along in this chapter, you see that is the woman. They have this very odd kind of a courtship where they've hardly ever spoke. They kind of hardly ever kind of exchange anything. And suddenly she says in a high shrill voice with an inflection, she just kind of unloads this kind of all this information about herself. And she continued to talk, and after a while he began to hear what she was saying. Years later, it occurred to him that in that hour and a half on a December evening of their first extended time together, she told him more about herself than she ever told him again. And when it was over, he felt that they were strangers in a way that he had not thought they would be, and he knew that he was in love. So she kind of opens up to him. Apparently it's going to be the last time she opens up to him. And he thought that they would, he felt that they were strangers in a way that he had not thought they would be, and that he knew that he was in love. It's like, wow, you're a stranger to me. I'm in love, which is like a strange coming together, which apparently isn't going to get replicated, and they're going to be strangers to each other, and that's like love to Stoner. And I mean, I think about his parents as these very closed, very unloving, they're their kind of parents, which I'm well aware of. And it's like he's replicated that. You get the sense like, oh God, you're going to replicate that in your thing. And I mean, Edith's life, her life was invariable, like a low hum, and it was watched over by her mother, who, when Edith was a child, would sit for hours watching her paint her pictures or play her piano, as if no other occupation was possible for either of them. Just this kind of stultifying, stuck, limited life that she seems to have had. And she has her sexual transformation. She grew almost a foot, so that their height was near that of a grown man. And the association between ungainliness of her body and her awkward new sexual estate was one from which she never fully recovered. These changes intensified a natural shyness. She was distant from her classmates at school. She had no one at home to whom she could talk, and she turned more and more inward upon herself. It's like, ugh, it's like two peas in a pod, in a way. Um, it is also that thing of growing large, being a large woman, which is, not delicate the delicate norm. Um, and well, Stoner goes to meet the parents, and the parents are kind of pieces of work themselves. Um, you know, he's he, you know he's he is he talks about basically his father kind of being betrayed by friends, and that kind of casting them down. So he's got this kind of sense of kind of betrayal, and who sense like his success is incomplete. He was extraordinarily vain and consumed with a sense of his own importance. Whereas Mrs. Bostwick had grown up impoverished Southern lady, and with presumption that the circumstances of need under which the family existed were inappropriate to its quality. So there's this kind of dissatisfaction and bitterness. That's the kind of the betrayal, dissatisfaction, and bitterness is what you get from these two things. It's like, you get Stoner's parents on his side being ground down by the kind of just the grind of life, and then you get the parents on the other side, and it's like, it's not looking good for the kids, I have to say. And I mean, they basically kind of run Stoner, her parents, the Bostwicks, run him through this whole thing of how he's just not good enough. And then, he starts to say, you know, you know, you know, if you believe that Edith would be unhappy, then I must. He paused, searching for the words. He wanted to tell Edith's father of his love for his daughter, of his certainty of their happiness together, of the kind of life that he could have. But he did not go on. He caught on Horace's face such an expression of concerned dismay and something like fear that he was surprised into silence. And it's like, no, Horace Bostwick said hastily, his expression cleared. You misunderstand me. I was merely attempting to lay before you certain difficulties that might arise in the future. I'm sure you young people talk these things over, and I'm sure you know your own minds. I respect your judgment, and ... And that was it. It's settled. He's like, no, you're no good. You're not going to be good enough for my daughter. You're going to disappoint her. But oh God, please take her, the kind of thing. And when Edith comes in, it's like, oh, we'll have a wedding. It's like, no, Edith's like, I want it done. I want to get it over with. I want it done quickly. If it's to be done, I want it done quickly. Which is like, oh God, the romance. This is the start of things, and it's just like, these are two people who fit into each other and are going to, you really get the thing to be miserable to each other. Her last words to him on this kind of romantic asking for her parents for the hand is, I will try to be a good wife to you, William, she said. I'll try. And he realized it was the first time anyone had spoken his name since he had come there. You know? Yeah, I think, it's like, William. Oh yeah, you're William. It's like you're a function of this family. It's like, I need to get married, so I'm going to marry you, but I don't know if I get the sense that either one of them is equipped. I'm not quite. I'm puzzled as to why Stoner is fixed on her. Why he's fixed on anyone in some ways, because he's been a strangely asexual character up until this moment of catching sight of Edith Bostwick. And now it's like, it's the first woman he's looked at and thought, and it's like, okay, we're going to do this, but I guess we shall see. Betrayal, bitterness, disappointment, opening with the Latin, the Roman poets who look on the coming nothingness as a kind of a tribute to the richness of their life, or the bitterness and disappointment of the medieval Christian poets who see this life as just sort of as sort of a mockery of the eternal static life that is to come. It's like I don't know if an ecstatic life is about to come. I think it's going to be bitterness and disappointment. I have a feeling. Oh, Stoner, I feel for you. I feel for you there. It's yeah, yeah. You feel it's a young person who's tried to get away from not having love in his home, but it's like ah, you found a fellow who's someone else who's kind of experienced the same thing, but are you going to just replicate more of the same misery? I guess we shall see. All right, more videos later.